So I was so excited when I put the call out in our community for anyone who wanted to come on the podcast and share a story as part of a story session, that you were one of the people who responded. And I think there were so many things that we could talk about. I had a list and I think you had a list, but I love that what we landed on is about undieting and body image, because we often think about like undieting and learning intuitive eating for all kinds of other reasons. But often I think it's hard for people to see that one of the benefits of stepping out of diet culture is actually feeling better about your body, even if your body doesn't get smaller. Hi, Melissa. Welcome to the Midlife Feast.
Hey, Jen, I can't believe it. Fangirling, just have to say it.
Why don't you just orient our audience to where you are in this midlife journey?
Okay, well, as Jen said, I'm Melissa. I'm a Middle Tennessean born and bred, and I am at age 56, just turned a couple months ago, and am still perimenopausal. As of this recording, I'm on day 125 with no Aunt Flo, for you listeners who know who she is. I'm not convinced that this is it, but I'll take the lesser as I can get it, and that's okay. I've been in the intuitive eating world about 2 years now, a little bit before I found Jen. I kind of found Jen because of it. Thank God for Instagram, and then thank God for this podcast, because it's been a sanity builder all the time with reinforcement. And I highly recommend to everybody and anybody that wants to have some sanity in their life at this stage. Kind of got into it right after COVID. Actually, it was in 21, because during COVID, of course, like everyone, I baked bread and sweets, and of course the scale went up a little bit, and I was still at that time kind of dedicated to weighing myself regularly. And then I don't know, I just reached a point, and maybe it was the perimenopause and I'm just can't do it anymore. I just reached out and I got a tap. I can't live this way anymore. And knowing that was being at that time heading to the mid 50s, it was before 55, but I was just like, I just can't live this way the rest of my life. I've spent 56 years, well, not quite, focused on always wanting to change my body, be a obsessive person about what goes into my mouth, and it just wasn't working mentally, physically, all of the above. So, I kind of found a little freedom here with exhale, and it's okay. And I think if I could tell anybody it's okay, that's what I want them to know. We could come to the other side, be who you are in your body, be in the moment in your body, and it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good reminder. Because I think we all fear not being okay, right? Even when what we're doing doesn't feel okay, counting, measuring, tracking, obsessing, worrying, thinking about food all the time, like that doesn't feel okay. And yet not doing that brings on this whole other kind of, bag of
It's
fears.
a panic.
It is
It's a sheer panic.
Yeah. So
Because you're so ingrained. Yeah.
So what's your story with dieting? When do you first remember, going down that diet road?
Oh, this is a wonderful slippery slope of started at a young tender age of about 12. I do remember, though. I'll tell this little story. So when I was 7, we went to a fair that had rides, and one of the rides was a little boat ride, and you had to be under a certain weight to ride the ride. Well, I was always on the heavier side. It's a genetic thing. My family, we all are just a little bit bigger people. And I remember so proudly telling the operator that I weighed 70 pounds. And I didn't know that was, oh my gosh, she's 7 and she weighs 70 pounds reaction. Luckily, the limit was 100. So I got to ride the boat and I got to ring the bell, and it was a lot of fun. But I remember that very vividly. And it used to just bring me to tears thinking about it. But now it kind of is a little bit more liberating. Like, that's that young girl who didn't know what that meant other than a number and I can ride a ride. So I remember that so vividly, but the sheer thing of actually being on a diet that I remember the most was about 12. My mother had found out at the time that she had thyroid condition, that she had underactive thyroid, and she was convinced that was my problem. But did she take me to the doctor? No. Her friend told her about kelp pills, and kelp has iodine. And so I was on the iodine pill, and that kind of started it. And then through the years, just ever since that age until the last couple of years, I have been in some mode or some fashion. Pretty much you could throw a pin the tail on the diet, and Melissa has participated in it. But my biggest time of plan that I stayed on the most in my life was WW, Weight Watchers. And I have some happy memories at those places, actually. I made some friends. We all had it in common. Like you say, it was all an organized way of eating and doing and tracking and being and thinking. And it's not the worst of times, but do I have some regret of all the time I spent in that mode? Yes, a little. But do I also think of it a little bit on the positive just because of that community? Luckily now I have a different community, which is awesome. So, but when I just look back, it's bittersweet. It's really bittersweet.
I think the community part is one of the valuable things that often comes out of programs like this. And, the saying, not, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Like sometimes people will say, oh, I still have a handful of recipes that I still really enjoy and love to make. Is it okay if I make them because they're part of this plan? And it's like, if you're eating them because you enjoy them, they're adequate, they work for your family or whoever else you have to cook for, and, they're nourishing and nutritious in every possible way, then it's just a recipe that you like. It doesn't have to be attached to that program, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that when we look at what worked well with our first, second, or third diet or whatever it was, I think sometimes it's helpful to say, you know what, I'm going to take something positive from that and carry it forward. I'm just going to leave all the crap behind. But the entry into Weight Watchers at 12, I still can't call it WW. The entry into that program, at a young age is definitely going to be familiar, because I would say that hands down that is how at least half of the stories of the people that I talk to start with. I went on my first diet at 12. That was certainly my story too, and it's often Weight Watchers, because it was maybe still is the most accessible for people, because it's everywhere.
It is. It is
Yeah.
everywhere.
And when we think about the diet cycle, which is that, predictable series of events, initially when you're responding to that uncomfortable feeling in your body or the desire to lose weight by doing something, even though that something is a diet, it does feel good initially. It does feel empowering. And as you learn new information, some of which can still be usable, like it's still helpful to know foods that are high in fiber or protein. Like that still is reasonable information to carry with you, but it's just the constant control and under eating that ultimately leads to any diet's demise, right? It's that, like, we can't control every bite for forever. We just can't.
Oh, I have another really fun story to share on that as well. I got in the middle of the last the last horizon of Weight Watchers for me, was let's see, I believe it was in the 2010s, whatever the kids call it these days, but in that time frame, I had got invited to a wedding and was in the middle of the program. And I remember talking to my leader at the time that, sweet tooth is a thing in my family for sure. And probably most people have some form of sweet that they enjoy, but wedding cake, just plain Jane wedding cake, is just one of my faves, just vanilla cake and the plain ice, buttercream ice, and oh, it's on. So I remember, talking to my leader about how am I going to count the points at the wedding. Now, was I thinking about how excited I was? It was my son's first time being a best man. His best friend was getting married, and I was a proud mama, and I had this new dress, and I just, was just feeling it and everything. But the whole time at the wedding, I'm going, how many points is going to be in the cake? So the tip of advice I got was one bite was 1 point. So
Oh,
when I go
goodness.
to get my slice of cake, I'm like, okay, how many points? I mean, like, it's just the whole time I'm focusing on this cake. And I had 6 bites for 6 points. I counted it. I can remember it to this day. So when I, but now I look back and I'm just laughing in my head about that, like, why didn't you just eat the dang cake and enjoy the day being there in that time? And it was just, but yeah. So there are so many things that I agree with you on that are good references that I keep to this day about foods with fiber and foods with protein. And there are some recipes that I still make because I enjoy them and they're pretty good. I mean, I don't think of it as a restriction. It's just a good recipe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that 1.1 bite thing definitely is something I've heard before. So I'm sure that others have as well. But, talking about food joy, the way that you described, how much you love plain Jane wedding cake and it's what you look forward to. Like one of the things that I love so much about intuitive eating is that it acknowledges that sometimes we eat things and want things just because they taste good. And that's okay. Right. And when we have food that we love, we need to be able to have that unconditional permission, not only to eat it, but to not feel guilty about eating it. Like food isn't something that we have to earn. It's something that we need to have every day. So like many people, I think that initial desire for weight loss is often coming from a number of places. But I would say that especially when we're younger, before, health concerns and conversations are coming into the picture, it's really about changing what our body looks like, at least for most people. Would you agree with that? Was that your experience too?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely. When you, in the teenage years, starting that diet, and that was right at puberty starting. And it's so funny how I've learned now, being older, it's definitely something that's missed in the education world, to understand that gaining some weight at puberty is normal for boys and girls.
Yes.
It's not segregated to either sex, and it's normal that you have that because what your body's about to go through, as well as it's normal to have maybe the middle happen in your later years because your body's trying to give you the estrogen naturally that it knows that it's dipping. So it's been such an education process for me. And I am a little kind of a self-help geek about my, physician heal thyself, Melissa's WebMD PhD is in process. But when I look back at, the time of wanting to change my body, it started about that age because I was more rounder, just all over. And then I got taller and I got curvier, and then, everything started happening. But for sure, it's always more so. I mean, yes, later in life, health things, health concerns, and the conversation about if you lose some weight, XYZ might get better, definitely happened. But in those teenage years, it was about fitting into what at the time I thought was the norm. There were several people in my growing up years and friends that never had any weight issues, were just little pencils and didn't have much shapes at all. And then there was maybe just a little handful of us that did. And we were always in that little clique. We were the ones that would skip lunch in high school because we thought that was good. Maybe drink a diet soda of some sort, and that was lunch. But then we would all come home and raid the cupboard and eat until dinner time because we were starving to death because we had neglected to eat. So it was just so vicious. But that body image for sure is a thing. And I was remembering the other day, there was this conversation about blue jeans, and I will say, I think blue jeans is like one of the hardest things midlifers that I've seen. We all kind of chat about, man, blue jeans just stink. We don't like them. We're trying to figure out which one's the one. And it's like the golden slipper or golden ticket or whatever. But I was remembering about the body image, and in preparation for being on the podcast today, was thinking about the time that I had this pair of blue jeans, and I wanted them to fit so bad. I laid on the bed and used a wire hanger, y'all. This is back in the wire hanger day, so I definitely dated myself, and used a wire hanger to zip them up, and got them up, stood up, couldn't breathe hardly. But the funny part is, now I look back then it was sad, and I probably cried about it. But now looking back, that muffin top just spilled out all over the top of them jeans, and it did not look becoming, but because I got them zipped, I thought that was the thing. They
Yeah.
fit, they worked, and no, they did not
No.
work. But it's so funny looking back and reflecting, and now, of course, never make those mistakes again. You learn from the past, but that I just remember that. And luckily it was the 80s and big long tops were in, so I kind of was able
Oh
to hide
yeah.
it. But so shoulder pads and big long tops were kind of a thing, the like long shirt, button up shirt thing. But yeah, I just will never forget that. So yeah, body image and it just was always a thing. And even in my family, we have a pet name for it. I'm not going to give the official full name to protect the innocent, like my cousins that might go, "What are you talking about, lady?" But we affectionately, it's known as the spread. And it is our lower pelvic area, the infamous fupa, and hips. And it is a family thing. There are many generations of women that have had it and that have it now and that are rocking it and going on with it. But I think that always put pressure because even at social family occasions, that was the spread, she's hanging out today, or whatever. And now I kind of think of it more as of an affection thing and not a, oh my gosh thing. But man, that took some work because I can still sometimes, even to this day, look at a picture and get triggered a little bit, but it's getting easier. And if I want anybody to know, I think it can get easier. You just got to work on it and with your body image. And also, when you get to the 50s, especially, well, even the 40s, some women are liberated. But I don't know what it is about turning in the 50s. There's a switch that just flips, and I just don't care what people think I look like. If I'm happy with it, I'm number one. That's what matters. And if I have anything to share, y'all are number one, and do it what matters to you. And if you like the look of it, go with it. I wear some things that I know some people go, I can't believe she's wearing that, but I don't care because I like it. So that's just how
That
it
is
is.
one of the gifts of midlife. Absolutely. I tell my teenage daughters that all the time. I'm like, I know you don't believe me, but in 30 or 40 years, you won't care. And it's just
No,
so
I know. I know.
like, it really,
I
really
tell
won't.
my 30-year-old fat now, like, honey, come on, 20 more years, you're just going to be so rocking it.
But so I remember, that realization of like, this is like my family thing, right? And that, this is kind of a genetic programming, um, was a big part of like making peace with, not just your relationship with food, but with your body. And I think that a lot of people feel that as they go into an undieting or intuitive eating journey, that they just have to accept that they will never be okay with a part of themselves. And I think your story and others really illustrates that, sometimes when you make peace with food and you're no longer using food to try and change what your body looks like or only change what your body looks like, it's much easier to be okay in the body that you have today, even if it doesn't change and never changes again.
Right.
Um, and I
And
think that that's hard for people, but it's so true if you've lived through it.
sure. And I think one of the things that resonates with me that you have said before as well um, was you may not necessarily love the body part all the way. It might still be, some days or whatever, but you're not obsessing about it anymore, or you have that fleeting moment with it. And I think that's still a work in progress for me
Oh yeah.
sometimes about my my thighs or whatever, just because they are the bigger area of my body. And sometimes I look and I'm like, oh, but then I'm like, but I immediately turn it around and go, they get me where I'm going. They let me walk 5Ks, which I enjoy. And it's not, yeah, they're a little dimply or whatever, but okay, they're happy dimples. So, okay, it's fine.
Yeah, and that's the body neutrality philosophy that we don't actually have to like or love any body part to still be kind and like ourselves, right? And so when we start to uncouple our body image from our self-esteem, it's just a lot more comfortable, and it just feels safer to exist in this world because not everything is tied to, do I like my body today? Because your body, we can't always control what it looks like. I've had 3 kids, 2 pregnancies, 2 C-sections. One of those pregnancies was a twin pregnancy that I measured 56 centimeters on the day they were born. Anybody who's used to kind of having their belly measured as part of, pregnancy knows that that is about 16 centimeters bigger than a single pregnancy. So it was I mean, huge. There is no way that my belly could ever, without major surgical intervention, ever look the way it did before. And my scar is ugly because it got an infection after, and like, but that's okay. Like, I don't have to love that to still feel okay in my body or to still treat my body with kindness and respect, right?
And that miraculous body gave you those 3 children. So
Indeed.
I think if we can kind of remember what this body does for us, it's not just it's not just a
Yeah.
placeholder. It's doing a lot for you,
Yeah.
You've earned it. You've earned it. You've earned the little sag or the scar or whatever.
So maybe share what some of the unexpected wins were from moving away and stepping out of diet culture and into a more, kind of anti-diet, intuitive eating space. What were some of the things that you learned along the way that were unexpected or surprised you?
Well, I don't know if the first thing, I do love a good cup of coffee. I am kind of shifting a little bit, not getting crazy with coffee during this wonderful perimenopause. I'm finding some things. I kind of switched to half calf just to have a little bit of caffeine, but it's more about the warm drink, I've decided. So if I can figure out another warm drink. But one of the things about intuitive eating and dieting, I like to use creamer. And I used to use basically a version of motor oil. If you look at the ingredients, it was not good for you. It was sugar free, all the artificial ingredients known to mankind. And I look back now and I'm like, what were you putting in your body? Because, of course, in the WW world, counting those points, and boy, you could get 3 tablespoons of creamer if you like it a little shade of tan. I like mine light tan and sweet. It made a big difference in that world because that would be one point. I could have my good cup of coffee that I loved, even though I might not have loved the taste necessarily as much or whatever because it was so artificial. Well, first thing in intuitive eating, I worked with a counselor and I was discussing what am I going to do about creamer, and because I still want that hot beverage with tea, coffee, whatever. And she said, well, why not go get some creamer that's made out of real ingredients? And that struck me like a lightning bolt. I said, wait a minute, you mean real milk and sugar? And she's like, yeah, why not? So I went down this path of creamer. Like it was just became comical in my family about how many containers of creamer were in the fridge. And it just was, and also I wasn't getting out measuring spoons. So I could just pour it to that shade that I liked. And even wasn't even so much about is it sweet enough. It was just I don't know why, but it has to be a certain shade. It's a personal tick, y'all. I don't know why, but it has to be this
I get it.
shade of
I get
tan.
it.
And I just it was so liberating about that morning drink to be able to have the real creamer. So now, as a fluke, I did a grocery pickup recently and they were out of the one I use and they substituted a version that wasn't sugar free, but was the chemical version. And I tried it. I could not drink it. I was like, this is the nastiest thing I've ever tasted in my life. And so now I have been on real milk and cream type creamers now for 3 years. So, going on 3 years.
Love
And
it.
so I guess my taste buds, and that's another thing as you age your taste buds, but that was the biggie. But for me was liberated to have real cream and sugar in her coffee and not feel guilty and not worry about the points or whatever. And then I found too, it's one of those amazing things that I think you learn when you figure out the intuitive eating or not, obsessive dieting is how good maybe some quote in parentheses, good for you. I know there's not good or bad, but for this analogy, the good for you things taste better and you want them more. It's because you don't have to worry about restricting or anything. So you're obsessing about those quote restrictive foods and you're not thinking about the foods that, would have been okay in the plan as much. And then when you get out of that cycle, that's what you want. You want the fresh vegetables, or you want that nice in season juicy apple and you can eat the whole thing. Or heaven forbid you eat a whole banana, because in the old days you only ate the half and then it got all brown. The other half got brown, like we were wasting food right and left because of that.
Would actually eat half a banana. Like
I used to back in the day.
But I just mean, like, or is anyone actually
normally? Yeah, no.
Like, is anyone satisfied by half a banana?
I mean, hello, the packaging for a banana is one serving.
Exactly.
Nature's one serving, y'all. That's nature's one serving. So I think that it was stuff like that just, and it's just amazing to me now. I can go to an event, or like I haven't been to a wedding in a while. I'm looking forward to one of these days going back and having that cake with no harm, no foul. But it's just now I can just be myself with the food. And just example, I had some dinner last night. I got full. I didn't finish the portion I had portioned out. My husband's like, "You're not going to eat the rest of it?" I'm like, "No, I'm full." And before I would have gorged myself because I was, obsessed about not eating, enough or whatever. And it's just so liberating to go, if I'm full, I'm full, and it's okay. And I can put it up for later, or I might not eat it or whatever. Or you can have seconds, or, my husband or something. And it's just so, that was to me the biggie, I think, kind of a long way around saying that it's just so refreshing not to be obsessed about it anymore and to go with what lead with satisfaction and go from there, right?
Leading with satisfaction, you just can't go wrong, because once you say yes to what you want, you're immediately in a place where it's so much easier to add the things in that maybe you need, right? Because gentle nutrition, everyone thinks that like intuitive eating is just not dieting, but intuitive eating includes gentle nutrition, which is finding that sweet spot between what you want and what you need. But you have to be approaching it from a place of permission and not restriction. And that's the only way to have that peaceful relationship that you've just described.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Melissa, this has been so helpful. And what would you say to someone if they were thinking about intuitive eating, but they're too afraid? Maybe they've had the quote unquote success that you have had with, other programs, and they're just afraid to kind of not do that. What's one piece of advice you would give them?
Well, I would say don't give up, because I will tell you, I kicked and screamed my way into my intuitive eating counseling. My sweet counselor, there were some days I know she got off calls with me and go, "This lady is hopeless," because I would just be fighting. I was fighting the system, and I was just fighting what I knew. And it was a lot of onion layers to peel back for me because of all those years of dieting. So I would just say, don't give up. Don't, and hang in there, and don't rush to the general nutrition chapter, because you're skipping the important bits if you do, because I sort of admit to doing that myself. And it didn't really help me in the long run, because you really need to go through all of it to get to the end and be at a place where it all sinks in, and it all is maybe something that you can put into effect a little more easily. And there are days still that there might not be a fleeting moment that still comes up, but I look back at 50 plus years of this life and this lifestyle and go, that's okay too. And I know how to rein that in. But I think my biggest advice, just don't give up on it. If you really want to give it a go, try and be patient with yourself, because it's a journey. And I know that's a cliche word, but it really is. You have to find the right path down the road, and it's there. You just got to give it some time and some patience. The GPS is constantly redirecting, y'all.
Recalculating. Yeah, and I echo that 100%. There's even an entire episode on why you can't rush gentle nutrition. It's part of the Undieting mini-series. So it's somewhere between 28 and 33. We'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, you can't rush it. And that's why I always say you have to stay committed to the process, not the outcome. Because the process is being able to recalculate, being able to kind of course correct based on how you're feeling, and not based on a set of rules. So I agree 100%. So, Melissa, it's time for the question. What do you think is the missing ingredient in midlife?
Okay. I gave this some thought, and only because I've cheated and only listened to every single podcast that I know that this is the question. And this is probably not that original, but I was really happy with what I came up with. And mine is living in the moment, because I look at myself. I struggled with that all my life. Either I'm worried about the past or worried about the future. I'm never in the moment. And I think in midlife, we need to be in the moment. Now, it's a
Yeah.
struggle to live in the moment when you're wanting that golden ticket of being postmenopausal to happen. But I was really studying hard this week about it. And, each step I'm taking to get to that is meaning something to myself,
Yeah.
internally and externally in my body. So I just need to be in the moment, accept the moment as it is, and just keep on going. So live in the
I love
moment.
it. It's perfect. And I think you might be the first person to have said that, actually.
I hope so. I kind of went back. I'm not lying. I did a little homework, but I don't ever remember hearing that. If I did, I missed it. But if
It's
not,
okay.
we share all, and we all mean well. So it's and that
And
we
when they're
and it,
repeated, it just means that they need repeating, right?
that's
So,
right.
yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your story. And I'm sure that your story will help others who will relate to many parts of it, I'm sure.
I sure hope so. And it's been a joy. Thank you so much.
Thanks.